Sup, everybody? This is Karak with ACG, and as always, who fucking cares? Let's get to this. You know me. You can tell by the title of the video, it's not going to be some sloppy kiss fest like those questionable music videos where folks come home with 122-degree fevers in the first case of dick Ebola known to man. But after playing some of these games, some folks may weigh them equally. Instead, this is going to be my 5 most hated games of 2018. In fact, these are games I didn't just hate because hate is just a word, and it isn't strong enough for me at least, because I hate them so much I want to invent a color to represent them. Most likely whatever color be by smashing everyone involved into a paste and then naming it blah. Now, before we continue, some people may think, oh, I bet something like Fallout 76 is on here. No, man. Fallout 76 is a back rub with a happy ending, and somehow you ended up with an extra $20 in your pocket like you pleased them compared to the titles I'm going to bring to you today. Because really looking back at 2018, these titles are in my book a virtual who's who of failures all one-upping themselves like there's some kind of finish line for a race called Shitathlon, and it's only won by athletes who do the absolute least they can do at everything possible. And it doesn't mean that they are just broken, because sure, that's a shit game as well, but it's not as fun winning a race if the other 40 cars can't even make the field. Let's begin. As always, if you like the video, whatever. And of course, we're looking at the first game in this goddamn line of mysterious sorrow and tragedy, and that is Gene Rain. This shouldn't be surprising to a lot of people. It'd be okay if Gene Rain were just a terrible game. Hell, that'd actually be a step up. It wouldn't even be on the list probably, but this fucking thing should be a warning sign. People left out in caves where nuclear waste is stored, and then thousands of years into the future, whatever humans remain would look at the picture of Gene Rain's box art and think, nah, thanks, I'm gonna pass, and Ookla and Ariel ride the fuck out of there on their radioactive horses. It really is just a terrible game mimicking other titles that frankly aren't all that cracking to begin with. It's got a sort of active reload system that doesn't work ever. Its cover system is a system that for some reason makes you question if somebody figured out that math isn't a requirement for space travel and figured out that being 10 feet away from cover was just, good enough for government work and never thought about it again. How does this kind of thing even happen? Or the first time you sit back and eventually look at the texture level and the technical art that's within the title. It's a game that couldn't get its own voice mixing right either, where you could actually hear headset mics being used for voice acting throughout it. No one remembered to level the sound, so one person says, "Hey Joe Bob, I see you're hiding behind that rock, but you're like 12 feet away from it." And then Joe Bob turns to the other character and bellows like he's trying to channel the goddamn Dovahkiin from Skyrim. In the innocent days prior to this title, I used to think that 7 Days to Die Console Edition was the lowest level of detritus gamers would have to crawl through. That was an absolute gem. It got released and every consumer was lied to that it was a retail product, when in fact, it wasn't at all. It was just the early access PC version, smashed into a port and then slipped out to the slack-jawed locals who buy things because Die's in the title and 7's the highest number they can friggin' count to. But Gene Rain somehow steps it up a notch by appearing just for a moment like it might be a title worth checking out, with a unique bit of an opener, a cool weapon system, and a child with ESP as the bad guy. You think maybe, just maybe, this might be enjoyable. But then it launches you into a series of battles with locations so poorly constructed that in some spots floors just aren't even there. To me, Gene Rain's like that old game of cups, where you put a coin under one and then switch them around and ask someone to guess which cup the money is in, except this time replace the money with calf cramps and the cups with digital storefronts, all still selling it. You have an experience just a bit more enjoyable than actually playing this game. Next up, Crysis, Planet of the Apes, VR Edition. First, let's imagine, if you will, a seated row of executives, all too busy patting themselves on the back for having created a movie based on reverse gorilla poaching, and then someone, I like to think his name is Steve, said, "Let's make it a VR game." And Jill said, "You know what? That sounds like an excellent idea, because as everyone knows, being crotch level to a ragtag series of professional soldiers who haven't watched since the last time Steve Jobs did would be amazing." And of course, so they did. Swinging around like a chimp in VR is akin to chugging down 9 whiskey sours chased by a smashed tuna milkshake and then just fucking somersaulting around the room for 10 minutes and expecting everything to just be hunky-dory afterwards. It is a collection of horrors. Its control was abysmal, as was apparently the desire to do anything with the series' story, its title characters, its spirit, and good tidings. They were all drowned somewhere like a victim in Unsolved Mysteries. I'm pretty sure Robert Stack would just start up an episode of Unsolved Mysteries and say, "Yeah, I ain't touching this shit," and if someone hasn't died from it, they probably should, and then cut to another Bigfoot sighting where someone's chasing a huge goat in the mountains. The gameplay sucked, the movement sucked, the sense of presence sucked, most of the graphics sucked. The gameplay had you spending hours just ducking behind a series of crates reloading an M16 that just jutted from your digital body like you were on the receiving end of a Spartan spear, but they ran out so they stabbed you with the butt of a gun. In fact, the only thing in the game that didn't sort of suck was that it ended, which in a way sort of sucked all by itself because it took about 4 hours to do so. But we ain't even done in this roller coaster ride of bullshit, ladies and gentlemen. Actually, if a roller coaster just goes downhill, isn't it just a slide with a bunch of buffoons who paid extra money for it? Anyway, I digress. Up next in this line of bullcrap is The Station. Now, there are few games I fear. In fact, now that I think about it, there are few things I fear other than a mace made of bananas or a gun that shoots rabid squirrels, but I would have gladly bathed in a tub filled with them than play this game anymore. It's a walking simulator that is, surprise, on a space station. I mean, for Christ's sakes, they've proven solitary confinement caused people to go mad, so why make another entire game about it? But then wrap it up in a story so friggin' slow it rolls out like Matthew McConaughey trying to tell a story in an interview at 1/4 speed. It's truly a game where you do nothing, you pretty much see nothing, and you experience almost nothing, and yet it somehow costs you something? In all actuality, the only real claim to fame the game has is that the name has a big goatsy 0 in it. So if you get a chance, check out The Station, especially if you really just don't like yourself. Next up, Extinction. Now, this game is far closer to a finished and acceptable product than any of the others on the list, but is more like that high draft QB that fades into obscurity after taking the original signing amount and then forgetting all his skills, half his talent, and at least 90% of what got him there. Extinction's basically an Attack on Titan clone that tries to one-up the game's shitheel sequel, Attack on Titan 2, with its own giant head-cutting-off series of gameplay mechanics. And at first blush, that may actually seem like a valid choice when you think about it. I mean, what's better than flying around as ninjas, slicing off enemies' armor parts, some actually requiring just a bit of skill to hit or figure out, and trying to take them down before they can absolutely smash every Tom, Dick, and Sally into human paste like a snail under a gardener's boot. I still think it's maybe worth $5 as a rental or Redbox or Gamefly just to leap in there and cut some heads off. But when you really think about it, a lot of things are worth $5, including a sack of marbles and jacks, and you could swallow them whole and have about as much fun. And last, who can forget Fear Effect Sedna? Probably everybody. A title that tried to outdo those trustees of Modern Chemicals who made the VR Ape game and talked about basically going out and making the most of a lackadaisical attempt at a pseudo-sequel that, to borrow a term, wasn't all that skipper to begin with, removing any of the DMC or Resident Evil vibes the first game had in its behind-the-shoulder viewpoint and more action-packed sections, and replaced it with an isometric real-time combat system that can be paused if you need to switch up a decision you had, sort of like the decision if you buy this or not. And also, one of the first games to have FPS issues in its own title screen, like the PC looked into the future and thought, oh man, are you serious? The game did almost nothing well, which in itself is sort of an accomplishment. Even for a popped-out viewpoint like this, the game animations are pretty goddamn abysmal, and everyone runs around like their spines are fused annually in some arcane ritual. Or the combat system's woeful way in which there's just the smallest delay for you when it comes to picking a target than the enemies. They don't seem to be hampered with that at all. Also, it has to have some of the worst sound in a game since, well, yeah, since Gene Rain, actually. And whether it's gun shooting, explosions, explosioning, or debris crash into the ground, a good half of it sounds like some dude in a booth yelling boom, bang, or the true lack of care has to be from the voice direction, though. I mean, if you're going to throw some voice into your game, you should spend at least a little time making sure it makes sense, right? Wrong. Instead, this is just a mashup of words that, if they're even really making sense half the time, they don't end with the proper inflections, turning questions into answers, answers into jokes, and one of the long monologues sounds like every single word was recorded and split up like an 808 beat, and then patched back together. When I look back at 2018, to me, terrible games aren't just the ones with a typical pattern of bugs, like someone's reciting pi with digital breadcrumbs representing each one. It's the almost lethargic feel that a title has towards success. When you look at it and think, why? Just why? Why did this get made? Who thought this was a good idea? And better yet, why doesn't every single company have that one worker whose sole job in life is to make sure people don't reheat fish in a microwave, and also warn people that absolutely horrible ideas are being made in some conference room somewhere? And I get it, a lot of people are going to disagree with me here. There are some terrible games out there that I didn't get a chance to mention, I didn't play, and didn't even know about. That's life, with Steam burping out enough asset flips, carbon copies, and barely working, questionably secured executables that their entire curation system should just be called nope. And that's it for me. I want to know what surprisingly terrible games you played in 2018. Now, when it comes down to it, a truly terrible game doesn't have to be one that doesn't have an enjoyable part to it, but one that, like I said, sometimes feels like it was just sort of thrown out there in front of the bus and hoping that when the bus hits it, everybody will get out and decide to pay for its hospital bills. As always, if you like this video, please subscribe. Maybe give it a thumbs up. Maybe give it a thumbs down. If you didn't like it, you can follow me on Twitter and Twitch and blah, blah, blah. It's all on the video. And as always, you can become a patron on the Patreon website, where we have the coolest damn Discord in the world when it comes to video game discussions, as well as some awesome merch you can get. Peace out and enjoy the rest of your week.